Thank you very much, and thank you, Barbara and Troels, and also thank you, Annette, very much for inviting me to this meeting today, because this topic actually means a lot to me. So I'm so excited also to tell you, Barbara, about my perspective working as a doctor. And as you can see over there, you have I've been thinking of giving this quite a lot of thought, but settling for less or demanding more, and also the whole title, the world the world versus MS. I think that should make you think, because it's my experience that this is how it might be felt when you have MS. I normally say that I do not have MS myself, as far as I know, but that you actually, with MS, you could feel that you are isolated from the world. There's something has happened. You've been disconnected. It's a neurological disease that disconnects you by demyelinization, but it's also disconnecting you to your body, and this mistrust you might feel towards your body. It can also be disconnecting you to your social life, or to other people, or even to life and nature, as we have said. So I think what we need to see is sort of figuratively, this disconnection. How can we reconnect people to life? First I need to show you some disclosures. So I've been asked to give my perspective as a person, as a doctor working with MS, and the importance of the priorities. And you can actually say that the question is actually, it's interesting why we even ask the question. And also ask myself, how would I know how things are? So my point is that before we set the scene between the patient and the doctor relations, there are some implications in that setting. There's something that in the context that we have taken for granted, just in the very context. So I think we need to have in our heads, and I'll come back to this later. It's of course the expectations, and you were talking about that, Barbara, too, in the meeting. And you have something about also there's different. It's different if you're in the emergency ward and you have somebody coming in with an ambulance. You just need to be working like hierarchically, like this, vertically, and you need to communication is short loop communication. I say something, you repeat it, you say something, I repeat, and we just act on things, and we fix what has gone wrong. That's the compliance, and the patient is not, we do this now because that's best for you, period. Save your life. So that's how we've been trained as doctors, so we need to have that in mind too how we are working actually. It's a culture. So, but when we're sitting in the day clinic and having people coming in, like you said, it's a different context. We need to be aware of that then it's more like concordance, that I need to make sure that everything that I do is in concordance with where you are in your life. At the same time, there is a difference between being a doctor and also being a nurse. Of course there is, you all know that, but when we're sitting as a doctor, we are in charge of the treatment and all the things that is going on with the patient. So we need to be working in our sort of scanning our left brain, and I'm just simplifying it, I know, to the whole thing, everything we learned about medicine, to make sure that we don't oversee anything. Because even though you have MS, you might also get other diseases. I'm sorry to be saying stuff like that. But we need to make sure that we're not overseeing anything as doctors, so we're very much focused on a rational way of thinking in our everything we've learned. At the same time, we need to be more in our right side of our brain, where we can activate the empathy and being together with you. So it's actually a quite complicated process. I'm not saying that it's impossible, but I think, I hope that you don't get it wrong, but sometimes I would like to be a nurse too, because then I wouldn't be in charge of the whole treatment in like the same way I could give myself more into just taking care of who people are. I hope and believe that we can actually be aware of this also positioning of who we are, that now I'm the doctor saving you and you're the poor patients, and I'm the Tarzan coming in from the left or the right, that we actually see each other as equals, that we make a lot of effort in that. And then I mentioned something about the structure of the healthcare system, that we are aware of, okay, I think we need to change that if we need to meet this need that we are talking about now. And I think that it's not only the priority of the patients, it's also the priority of me as a doctor. And it brings me to the next question, because who are we actually? Who are we? Well, I'm a doctor and you're a patient, but that's not that interesting to me. It's of course a context that has a sort of a contract between you and I, that the focus is on you now as a patient, and I'm here to help you and to support you. But basically, overall, more than that, we are just human beings. We are human fellow beings sitting, talking to each other. And I think that's very important because when we're talking about the priorities, so that we don't sort of create these trenches that you have your priority, I have my priority. It's the same priorities. When I look into my own heart and my life, what's important to me, of course, it's not that difficult. It's just obviously that's the same that's important for the person sitting in front of me on a more general level, like you, Troels, showing the different kinds of intelligences, what is important, where you have your focus. So I can say, for my own part, well, I'm a doctor, but also I'm a man. I'm a male, Caucasian. I'm a father of 4. I'm a husband. I'm a friend. I'm a son. I'm a brother. I have many I'm just a human being. And I have my fears and my beliefs and my trust in myself and my weaknesses, my vulnerabilities. I have all these things with me because I'm a human being. I know what anxiety is because I know that I shall die one day. I know that I shall lose everything. I just don't know when. My point is that all these things are just existential premises that we have to live under. Whether I am a doctor, whether you're a patient, or what is a patient? It's just a sort of, it's a people with MS. It's somebody who is living with something that they need to we need to handle it somehow. And we need to do it in a community. We need to do it together because you can't, we need to live in communities where you actually take care of each other. So that's the way I would like to see. I think it should be said when you enter the hospital that this is why we're here. So you don't have this, there's a doctor, there's a nurse, we're people being together here. MS to me is very interesting in many ways, not only as a doctor, but also I see it's obviously a neurological disease, but it's more than that. It's also an existential disease. It's a disease that shows the individual with MS the premises of life, that we don't know what tomorrow brings, but it definitely also shows that to me. We do not know what tomorrow brings. When you have a diagnosis like this, of course, this is just put into your face like this, and how can you distract from that? How can you actually live your life around that premises? How can you have the good life in balance that you're talking about? Some of the things that very much happens when in my experience with people when they get this diagnosis, is that you lose part of your identity, you lose part of who you are, and that's horrible. And there's a fear of not knowing what the future brings. In some way, the future disappears. The future is not there anymore. And in a large extent, our brain lives in the future. The brain lives by taking in all these stimuli and trying to foresee how is that going to work out, what's going to happen next. And you can then have the rewarding system or the fear system activated. It's not just, it's shown that like 25% of every person with MS, they have sort of post-traumatic stress symptoms because they live under this stress all the time. I think it's important that we address that and we know that and see that as a common thing that we need to attend to together. And that we also, as a doctor or a nurse or whoever we are, of course respect some kind of professionalism. I'm sitting with a white coat and it's you who are in focus, but that I also have the courage to disclose something whenever appropriate towards my fellow next people with MS, that who am I? And that we're all vulnerable and we're all imperfect, but there's something that's very important, that is that we do make an effort in helping each other to be aware of one another. That we see each other. This is Louisa, she was actually here, but she's gone now, from Portugal. Like in this Avatar movie, I see you, and that's very powerful to feel that you've seen. And it takes a lot of effort for me to make sure, because how can I understand the fatigue that people with MS have? Well, I don't know if I can understand. How can I understand what it's like to be the fear of losing? So I have the privilege that I have a lot of people with MS that are my personal friends, like Louisa, because some years ago I made a project where I sailed around the world with people with multiple sclerosis in a sailing boat with these people as crew. So we have been sharing our fears and our hopes and our lots of things together, just as ordinary people where I said, I don't care if you have MS, if you can't use the left hand, use your right hand. We are here together. And that's yet another point about this, that we're all vulnerable and imperfect. I consider myself pretty strong, but I have to say that one of the bosun on the boat, who's a young man, he was pretty much faster in hoisting the mainsail than I am, which I still regret. But you just have to understand that we can't be good at everything, and we can't be the best at anything. There are so many things to be taken care of in a group, so many things that is important for why we're doing what we're doing. My point is that we're always, even though we're imperfect and vulnerable, we're always worthy of belonging to something. And that, I think, is a very important priority of everybody, and obviously, therefore, also for the people with MS sitting in front of me. That you feel worthy of being part of something, your family, your workplace, your community, wherever it is. And this might be also an inner conflict, that you might be your worst enemy, yourself. And how can we take care of that? How can we make sure that people, they feel that they are genuinely belonging to something and being an asset? It's difficult. It's different from person to person, and maybe there are also some gender differences. But anyway, we need to be open-minded and to be able to address these issues. One other thing is that, what is the story we have? What kind of stories do we create about ourselves? And I think that you were looking into the brain, of course, and nucleus accumbens, about what are we thinking, that if I do this I get a reward, or am I punished in the amygdala, if you get my point. What do we expect, and what stories do we create about ourselves? Who are we? This is a story about Greg from Australia. And Greg, he has MS, and he lost his job due to MS. He walks very poorly, actually. And he was divorced, he lost his job, many things. This is his son, and his daughter is standing, where is the pointing thingy? And that's, anyway, daughter and son. And this picture is taken when we arrived with a boat from New Zealand to Sydney, and we were running through a full storm, and Greg, he was standing in this full storm, screaming towards the waves, like, wow, like a primal cry. And we had to say, we're very careful as seamen. We don't want to annoy Neptune and Apollo and all of these guys. So, but it was like he was just raging against his MS and feeling so much alive and strong. He was now the man that he would like to be. And look at the sun, look at the eyes of the sun. Take that. So now his life has changed completely. He's now working again, and he's sailing a lot. But I love this picture. It actually brings tears in my eyes. He could then become the father he wanted to be. So this is something of things we need to be aware of course, when you're sitting in front of this individual. What have you lost? What have you gained? Who are you? What's important to you? So another thing, that's our actions. So what do we do together? Because Greg, he couldn't do this together. We need to put together these communities where we actually set goals for ourselves. And when I'm talking about this, I'm coming back to it in a while, about the structure of the healthcare system. It's not a political speech or anything. It's just some thoughts that I have, because we are moving towards the old compliance, where the doctor you have just to follow the doctor's orders, into the concordance and also the healthcare system. And how can we bring that on to other aspects of society in general? I see my role as a healthcare person. I sometimes talk about it like in three columns. I have the white coat on, all the knowledge that I have achieved, and I'm standing, so to speak, on the shoulders of giants, because I didn't bring this together all myself, and I'm so I rely on the whole institution. I'm proud of that. We've achieved so much, and it's very important also in meeting the person with MS that this is addressed correctly, and that you feel comfortable that I know what I'm talking about when I'm talking about no evidence of disease activity, that I actually have done my homework and stuff. And then the other is I take off the white coat figuratively, and I talk to you. Who are you? And the way that I was talking about before, I genuinely am interested in knowing who you are. And the third column is, okay, when we then have found out what are your priorities and how can we work on them, what do we do then? What are the frames around us that we can actually live this out? I think that's an important thing, to talk to decision makers and get out into the public, and that's also why that the credo of this year's MS Day is in My Invisible MS, or the visibility, to create visibility about this. So I'm getting back to this. I shall look at the time. I've already talked about some of these things already, so I don't know if I will go that much into them, but I would like to just briefly show a couple of cases of how I work as a doctor in the clinic with some of the people, because for me it's what exact questions should you ask, and I agree that is a good thing to do. Don't get me wrong, I completely agree we should find some of these questions, opening questions, and then we create a culture by doing that. I'll have some cases. Take the woman with a child with difficulties. It's by when we say hello and sit down, that I, as a doctor, sit down and just invite you to say something. Okay, now we're sitting here every 6 months or every year, and people, they start talking. And what's interesting to me and what is to hear what's being said between the lines. And maybe people, they say something and then they say, but that's not what we're going to talk about today. Or I don't know why I'm talking about that. Okay, back to business. I always note that, and then I found not immediately, then afterwards come back to it. And in this case, this woman, she was having a child with difficulties, and it turned out that it was her fatigue and a lot of other things in her MS that made her think that she couldn't be the mother she wanted to be. And that's what we spent most of the time talking about, because I was also very lucky that all her blood samples, they were all right. Her MRI was normal and stuff, and she was walking the same way as she did last year. But I need to, of course, make sure that I prioritize my time correctly, also so that I'm still an MS doctor. If you know, I'm taking care of the physician part. The time is running, so I'll actually take the other one, because it's point number 2, story number 2, because I really like that myself. This was a carpenter, and he was swearing. He was talking about he had this gate into his garden that he couldn't, and it couldn't close correctly, and he has problems with his right hand, so it couldn't work on it. And I was devastated. He was sort of, I'm not the man that I should be. I'm a carpenter. I'm not worthy of. I can't even fix my own gate. Who can love me? Who am I? I'm a disgrace. Stuff like that. And that's a very dangerous path to go down. Because it's also difficult to live with a man like that, and to carry his shame, and his shame is one of the most contagious feelings, if you know what I mean, and difficult to handle. But then he also said, but that's not what we're going to talk about. But I did my work around the other things, and I said, I think maybe that's exactly what we're going to talk about. And I asked him, how were you going to fix this gate? And I said, I can't use this bloody hand anymore and stuff like that. I said, okay, is there any other way you can fix that gate? My point is, we spent half an hour sort of running through how he could fix that bloody gate. And he was so suddenly he was ignited in his eyes again after 10 minutes, because this was actually a fun idea. 2 weeks later, he came by and he shouted down the corridor to me, I have fixed the bloody gate. Right, there you are. That's a wonderful story in my opinion. We also had, during the crossing of the Atlantic, a woman who couldn't open the big door out to the toilet in the storm. And that was my MS, she said, and I went out to her with her. Exactly, my point is, don't accept the stories immediately. Be interested and find out, okay, why is it because of your MS? I went with her, and she showed me how she would open that door, and I said, I would kill myself if I tried to open that door that way. It's a very heavy door. I put myself with my back towards the wall, I put my foot there, and then I could open the door, and then she could open the door. So it didn't have anything to do with her MS. And what am I trying to do? I'm trying to sort of focus on this doctor-patient relationship, this my perspective of why are the priorities important. I think they're very important because, obviously they're important because that's why I'm a doctor. That's why I'm in the world. It's because I want to help these people who have been struck in life the way that I could or my family could. So I want to help catch people when they fall. And of course, it needs to be on the premises of the people who are falling. And it needs to, I think that you showed this slide about the quality of life in the world, and you saw how red it was somewhere and how green it was in our world. And I think that's got to do with, I don't know, but I think it's got to do a lot to do with trust. Of course, there's prosperity and the economy, but that goes along with also kind of trust that we have this welfare system, this social security system where we catch each other, so that we actually feel that we are worthy of belonging to a place, and we can work further on that. So this is what I'm getting at when I'm talking about. Well, this was the question that I was given for today. I've already answered. I think I wasn't very specific, but my point is, why is it important to include these priorities? I would like to put the perspective up on a more sort of higher level, that we are all the same. There's none of us who's going to live forever, crying out loud. We're going to die, right? We're going to lose everything. I know it's not a very fun message to give, but there is a lot of wisdom in that message. So I said that people with MS, they represent an existential disease. They also represent a wisdom, a possibility. And that is a very important point for me, this creating possibility, because when you lose hope, which comes, despair comes from the words espera, to hope, despair, that's when you lose your hope. How can you meet that? You can create possibilities. You can say, you're good enough, and we have these possibilities. You can look on things in a different perspective. So you can create a culture. That's what I would like to address in my talk today. Listen and just be there, and work on the expectations of the positioning of who am I. I'm a doctor and you're a patient, so there is an asymmetry in our relationship in that room, but most importantly, we are just two human beings being together. And from that position, we start talking. And I think also that we need to talk about how it's the structure of the healthcare system, and you can even more add to that also how our society is. And that's not a political message, it's just actually basic. What do we want as humans? We want to be part of something. We want to belong to communities and to families. We want to create strong relations. We know that from infant psychology, that they are just open to create relations and plasticity, to create new pathways in the brain so that they can know how to become part of this group. And when we feel that intuitively, we want to give to that community. So that's my basic when I'm out. The basis of where I talk, to just answer your question from your talk. So how can we? I've already given ideas to how I work as a doctor, but I think that we should have. I'm so envious for Finn Bosen, who's sitting there, because he's working at the MS hospital, where they have all the different interdisciplinary groups. They have doctors, nurses, dietitians, physiotherapists, ergotherapists, everybody are there, psychologists, so they can work like that with it, and you're together with people down, and you do stuff together. So, and how can we also sort of bring this out into the society in general? I like to address that and create the accessibility and the worthiness and the sort of wisdom, so that we can live our lives in good balance here and now. You can actually take this we'll finish now, this very fearful anxiety, fear can actually take you away from life, and and it's double pain, because you know that the fear is taking you away from the only thing that you have now, which is now. But how can you get out of it? Sometimes it is bringing people together and out into the nature. And what I do is take people out sailing, and then this feeling can be transformed into sort of a more sweet, melancholic feeling, that, like Greg saying, wow, I'm here now, come what may. So thank you for listening. This is the last slide. Hope opens our minds and hearts for possibilities. Give us the courage to live our lives together. Thank you very much.